Hello everybody. I decided I'm going to make things even more complicated. I'm going to do a very brief, keyword brief, not an exhaustive, history of the Nation of Islam. This is going to be very, I'm going to try to make this fairly short, hit the high notes. I'm sure that eventually other people will see this and be like, hey, we don't really care for what you're doing with this. And I would say to that, okay, that's fine. But for the moment, for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and put up this video as a way to at least describe some aspects of the Nation of Islam and kind of at least talk about some general things about it. So let's give it a start. So the Nation of Islam was created on July 4th, 1930 by the lovely gentleman Wallace Farad Muhammad, also known as Wally Ford, as well as Dr. Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It started out as more of an offshoot of the Moorish temple led by the late Noble Drew Ali. Now, there's a lot that you can say about the history of the Nation of Islam before Malcolm X. There are so many stories that we can get into. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and produce gossip, this and that. You can look that up for yourself, but one of the more popular aspects that I'm going to hit is about 1942, when Elijah Muhammad preached that black folks should not be involved with the draft. They should not go over and fight a war for the white man. And this is one of the more famous aspects. There are so many other stories, but I'm not, like I say, I'm not going to indulge any sort of conspiracy theory, this and that. I'm going to try to remain with the facts. And amongst this is that in this time, the Nation of Islam was helping to build up its reserves, and they bought a lot of different. They bought a lot of land, including what would become Muhammad Farms later on. So the Nation of Islam definitely grew to approximately 75 different mosques around the United States. Now, it does have to be said, of course, that the Muhammad Farms was not established until, I believe, the 1960s or 1970s, when allegedly Elijah Muhammad was making deals with the Ku Klux Klan. But that is all hearsay. Ultimately, I'm not going to make any random claims about that, but I will say that that is what is assumed. So in 1948, a young man named Malcolm Little wrote to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Mr. Little had been a burglar in Boston, but he had a very big legacy. His mother was part of the UNIA, which of course goes back to the struggles of Marcus Garvey, and of course, his mother was involved with the UNIA, and due to circumstances that happened due to some admittedly white supremacist violence, Malcolm's mother was placed in a sanitarium. And once he became Malcolm X and renounced his slave name of Little, and once he was a minister within the Nation of Islam, he did release his mother, and she lived out the rest of her life in peace. So before I go further, I just want to make sure here, but this is an introductory Cliff Notes version of the Nation of Islam. To actually properly look at the history and all the different strands of where people went and what organizations were started would take an immense amount of time, which I do not plan on doing. So this is just basically an introductory version for people to say, oh, you can look it up on Wikipedia and then say, oh, this person was connected with this person was connected with that. And that's what I want people to do, is to click on these names and say, oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay, and you can kind of put the threads together and you can see what you want with it. I'm basically just doing this as an introductory to kind of say this is what the Nation of Islam, some of the highlights of it. There's much deeper history out there. I just want to say that just for the record. So in 1955, a young gentleman who was then known as Louis Alcott happened to be performing a show of calypso music, and this happened to be around Founders Day, which is July 4th in this case, and happened to go to a rally of the Nation of Islam where he heard the great Elijah Muhammad. That man later became Louis X, and then turned his name to Louis Farrakhan, the current minister of the Nation of Islam and the head. Now, there are many different aspects and many different stories that you can hear about Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, which I will not bring up here. What I will say is that ultimately, he did have a friendship with Gaddafi. Ultimately, the Nation of Islam was getting funds from Gaddafi as well. So there was support from Gaddafi's government to the Nation of Islam, which helped to continue on with their many schools that they had, their Muhammad farms, and helped to, I'm sure, fund groups of the Fruit of Islam, which is kind of like I'm going to be very careful with my words here, but ultimately, I guess you would say the cream of the crop. We'll just put it that way instead of comparing any group or organization. We'll just say it's the cream of the crop of the Nation of Islam. They go through intense training. For example, that there have been many trips to the United Kingdom where the Fruit of Islam is, where they go and speak to people and debate. There's a very important aspect. In a lot of ways, the Fruit of Islam is the public face of the Nation of Islam. In some cases, I'm not going to say completely, but in some cases. What needs to be said, of course, is that after the death of Mr. Gaddafi in 2011, and definitely rest in peace to him. We'll just be praise be for a wonderful man that he was. Ultimately, the Nation of Islam needed some other connections. So, in around May of 2010, Louis Farrakhan had heard about and given speeches about Scientology. Now, this comes from a story that happened to a gentleman named Tony Muhammad, a Nation of Islam minister who was beat up by the police, the LAPD, and was recommended Scientology by a friend. And basically, I believe this was around 2005 that this occurred, and then I think that, basically things were mulling over this and that, and ultimately Minister Farrakhan decided to enter into some financial dealings with the Church of Scientology. Now, of course, this is highly suspect and everything else, and this kind of is in conflict a little bit with the idea of, working with white people, this and that. Ultimately, of course, the idea of Yaqub. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but I'm going to do it now. The idea that Yaqub created white people, created white people on the island of Patmos, which is just off the Greek islands. I believe it's one of the Greek islands. Maybe I'll be ignorant here, but nonetheless, the idea that white people were created from melanated DNA and would then spread from there. This is kind of the origin of that. This comes from, of course, the biblical Jacob, and this is how they viewed it. Of course, this also goes into the theory, of course, about the Nation of Islam, that ultimately there will be a spaceship, the mothership, as it is known, that will come down and destroy and kill all white folks, and then the world will be a happier place. That is an actual theory. Another one, of course, is the wheels, which Minister Louis Farrakhan still talks about in his speech, in his most recent Founders Day speech just on this past July 4th. He did speak about the wheels and talked about the how that works today. So like I say, there are so many other threads I think I wanted to cover, but I think that this is getting kind of long. So what I will end with, of course, is that there is someone who is waiting in the wings. You have Ishmael Muhammad, one of the unfortunately illegitimate sons of Elijah Muhammad. He has been training, learning about the Old Testament and New Testament Bible as well as the Quran for 20 years in Mexico. And now they're starting to show Mr. Ishmael Muhammad to, we've seen him on some of the YouTube videos, and he has been on the Breakfast Club as well. So he is slowly becoming the new face of the Nation of Islam. Of course, Louis Farrakhan, of course, has still plenty of mileage to go through. You can't beat the swag that brother has. So, with that, I think I will end it there. Like I say, that there was so much stuff, and I may do another video talking about some of the other threads. But I think with that, I will end it there. So I bid you adieu, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.